My name is Ricardo Prada. I'm Director of AI UX for Google DeepMind, which considers itself the engine of the future of Google's product line. And I wanted to talk about a few things that I think will affect how we look at design in the future. But one thing I noticed about being at a user research heavy conference that I loved is seeing how many of the presenters took a baseline of where the audience was at the beginning of their talk. One thing I noticed, though, is that none of them actually brought their lab notebook out. So how are we doing data collection if we're not keeping track of the numbers? All right, welcome to my study. I promise this will take no more than 10 minutes. Your answers will be kept strictly public. All right, now one thing we heard earlier today was that about half the people in this audience are working on AI features right now, right? And the majority of the audience is using AI features as part of their day-to-day work. Question number one, raise your hand if your AI that you're either designing or are using for work could be described as chat boxes. It's a big chunk of the room, hold on. Okay, how many of you that chat boxes are the ultimate final form of AI? We got nobody. Okay, so I'm gonna put the notebook away for a moment. It'll come back later. One of the things that this tells me is, if I were a cynic, I might say that we're all wrong because half this room is building features for a UX type that most of us believe is a dead end, right? I see applauding for that. Don't applaud yet, because that's not where I'm going. But this designer that I worked with for a long time, one of my favorite designers, would tell me optimism is not a disposition that is temporary. It's not a personality trait. Optimism is a discipline. Optimism is something that is hard work, it's methodical, and it requires work to get to. Putting on my optimist hat, I would say that instead of being on our way towards the dead end, we are actually at recognizing that we're in a moment of transition between the world as we've known it and the world as it's about to become, right? And we realize that there's value in some of these AI features, even if it means having paradigms from the old world. So what I wanted to do today is talk to you about all of the different ingredients that we're developing at Google DeepMind that could be components of what that future looks like, so that we can start preparing ourselves for the methodologies, the philosophies, and the things that we need to prepare for the future, okay? Now, before we begin, I wanted to share the philosophy of Google DeepMind in case you guys are wondering how we're approaching the development of AI technology. So at Google DeepMind, our goal is to build AI responsibly to benefit humanity. That is the overarching goal, and hopefully all of the things that we do are aiming in that direction. Now, in Google Research, Google researchers created some of the foundations of modern AI technology, things like the transformer. Google DeepMind, we have several historic breakthroughs in AI, like the development of AlphaGo, which was one of the first times we saw how AI systems can teach themselves to do complex tasks and achieve the kinds of goals that humans want to do. Now, we continued that line into more and more complex environments, so we got to StarCraft and things like that. And these games laid the groundwork for many more foundational breakthroughs in AI. Over time, started looking at how AI systems could teach themselves how to operate in more complex environments. So this is some of the work that we've done in robotics. You can see that at the beginning, the way the robots operated was funny. It would stumble around. But over time, these AI systems were able to develop proper playing of soccer without having the level of instruction that we had seen in the past. Now, one thing that's important here as UX people is to remember that these experiments show how computing is leaving the two-dimensional screen that we're used to, right? So if you're not thinking about actuation in your product line, maybe it's time to start thinking about what methods you would use when the AI product that you have operates in the real world as a physical entity. Let's move on to the next one. So we talked earlier about the chat box, and even within that paradigm, there's a lot of experimentation happening on to turn that into more malleable user experiences, right? So even though we have a prompt here, we're now beginning to develop UI elements with that. Generative AI has become a really big thing. Most people are accustomed to about 3-second videos, right? So you see like slices of little 3-second chunks as most of the like AI stuff you might see on Reels or TikTok. Latest models that we have can run for about a minute and even beyond a minute, which is much longer than what you might be used to in a Hollywood show or something like that. And now they're being generated with high quality 1080p resolution videos, a wide range of cinematic styles. and nuance and tone capture of a prompt. Over the years, we've built AI systems that can do amazing range of things like turning vision and language into actions for robots. We saw robots a little bit earlier, but now we're operating in more normal environments. For example, my teams in Google Research and Google X worked on the Everyday Robot project and many others in that space. We're also beginning to see AI systems that can achieve a level of content knowledge and even procedural knowledge, solving things like Olympiad level math problems, going into medicine and passing tests, going into the legal profession and passing those licensing tests. And earlier we were talking about token length, so how much memory an AI system could have, and we were talking about it in the size of like tens of thousands of tokens. But in the past year, we've seen dramatic, unprecedented improvement in memory. For example, some of the experimental versions of Gemini can process up to 10 million tokens. This breakthrough means that a model like 1.5, the current generation of models that are out there, can process information like 1 hour of video, 11 hours of audio, code bases with 30,000 lines of code, or 700,000 words in a single go, right? Now, at Google DeepMind, we're beginning to put some of these capabilities into an experimental platform that we're sharing. We just shared a version of this at Google I/O, a project called Astra, which is an experiment in assistive technology. And what I'd like to show you, because it's really easy to say 10 million tokens, it's much harder to understand what that means from a practical perspective. I'm just going to show you a little slice of one of the Astra demos. And as you watch this demo, I'd like you to consider how you would respond to the user's prompt. So the user will be the first person talking.
Hey, I'm going to show you some objects. Just do your best to remember them.
Sounds fun. I'm ready. I'm pretty good at remembering things, so go ahead.
Okay then, name every object I just showed you.
Okay, let's see. There was a seashell, a crab figurine, a spiky gold ball, a yellow glass sphere, a goldfish, and finally, a little potted plant.
Good job.
One thing that I noticed is that for me, it was very hard the first time I saw this to keep track of all of those objects, let alone be able to identify them. Another thing that might be a little less obvious is that it actually saw a lot of objects that it did not name, right? It saw tables, it saw chairs, it saw rugs, but the ability to understand user intent is what we're beginning to see in some of these later generation models. Now, that brings us to one of the most important aspects of the new generation of models, which is multimodality. The idea that we've gone from large language models that are mostly about text going into a model and going through the statistical analysis that spits out a prediction about the next words, to understanding all of the different types of information and putting it all into a single model that can operate multimodally. So it can take in information that is visual, auditory, geolocation, things like that, feed it in at the same time without having a translation layer that goes through language. This also means that it can output its results in any of the modalities that it's capable of, which means we're going to go into a world that's no longer about a verbal response, but potentially an action, some movement that happens in the world. The beautiful thing about this is that many of us in design have longed for this idea of universal design, where we move from accessibility as a way of getting some users to be able to get up to speed with the majority of people, to a world where everybody is equal from the beginning, right? And the system is able to detect what the abilities are of that user at that moment and recognize that people change their abilities over the course even of a day, let alone a lifetime. Okay, given the prompt to try to do this in about 10 minutes, I went through Google's latest experiments in user interface, and I looked for the fastest user interface per second video that I could find. And I'm going to try to tell you what's on screen. This goes really fast. I've tried this many times. It often does not work. So please bear with me as I try to narrate what's about to happen. Ready? Okay. Good branding, classical user interface. We're really accustomed to seeing something like this. Wait a minute, look, those are smart filters. And now we've got writing assistants coming up. Check out summarization. We've got information retrieval tasks going in. There's conversational design. I think we're moving into image generation now. We've got co-creation and shaping. Now we're in wearables. Now it's augmented reality, advanced levels of reasoning. There's Lupe Fiasco. He's a musician. We've got gestures, image recognition, sports. We've got productivity tasks. There we go. We've got education, adaptive user interfaces. Lupe is about to go do some music in just a second. Yeah, there he is. He's in Chicago. Then we've got photography, memory retrieval, We've got audio interfaces and mobile devices. We've got live search. We've got the ability to create your own AI system. We were going through 3D environments. Then there's market research that's going to tell us about branding, because it always comes back to branding in the end, doesn't it? Thank you. Okay, now one thing we know is that all of these are interim experiences, right? That's where we started this whole conversation. But what we also understand is that the sheer speed of change has been amazing and very fast already. Now, my belief is that society will soon have to make very important decisions where we decide, are we going to live in a mindset of scarcity, which is what I hear oftentimes when people are concerned about these technologies, or whether we're going to be like my designer friend and choose to adopt a mindset of abundance. Now, whether you believe me that I think we can get to a world of abundance, one thing I think everybody agrees with is that right now we have an abundance of uncertainty. Now, the way I like to think of uncertainty is that it's another word for research questions, right? And the best people to solve research questions are people who specialize in research, right? The question for us as researchers is whether we can prepare ourselves philosophically and methodologically for all of the changes that are coming and guide our society towards the kind of world that we actually want to live in. Thank you.